Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants, who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him he began to choke him, saying, Pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant! I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers, until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
Good morning. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last week, you know today's the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And, you know, there's been stories all week, and especially today in the paper and on TV, of course, there'll be lots of stories about, stories of loss of life, and then stories of heroism, stories of pain, stories of triumph. But what I haven't seen yet are any stories about forgiveness. So when I was looking at the readings, I think it was on Monday for this week, and knowing it was going to be 9/11, I thought, wow, what a great juxtaposition. And that's like a fancy word that I heard in the seminary for 9 solid months, juxtaposition. But all it means is if you compare something. So if you put 9/11 next to the word forgiveness, it's an odd juxtaposition. It's an odd comparison. They don't seem to match. And so that's what struck me when I saw the readings about forgiveness and then 9/11 today. So my question today is to a lot of us, and really kind of to the nation. Are we ready? She's not. But are we ready to forgive those who terrorized us? And as a people, are we ready to forgive those who can inconvenience our lives with all these things that have happened since 9/11? For instance, the way kind of 9/11 touches us, I wasn't in New York. By the way, who has friends or knows somebody that was hurt in 9/11? Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I do. I know someone distantly that was in one of the buildings. So, 5 people out of 50 over here.
I know somebody
6,
that helped.
7. Yeah. So 7 people out of 50 or so. That's close to 10%. So some ways we've all been touched by it. We've been touched by it if you travel, that you gotta take off your belt and take off your shoes and put on all those type of things. You almost feel like, what else do you want, And it gets to the point where now you gotta put your hands up and they body scan you and all that type of thing. And I read that the the budget for Homeland Security for the last 10 years is over $500 billion, so $500 million. And not wanting to get into those issues, but just thinking about, 9/11, that juxtaposition or that positioning of 9/11 and forgiveness is will we as a nation ever forgive what happened to us? And I thought, there's been a lot of stories too about, well, this isn't the first time we've been, hurt as a country. And we don't have to look that far back. Slightly before my time, but who's here was alive when Pearl Harbor happened? Who remembers Pearl Harbor? Okay. One, two, three, four. Miss Bear's not raising. So 5. So again, it's 5, 6, 5 out of 50. That's 10%. I mean, that's 10% of the people are part of what they call a silent generation, right? That lived through World War II and all that. And I wasn't alive then, but we do have good friends. I have a friend, Stan and Margot. Margot's an 80-something. You know how they say 20-somethings? Well, she's an 80-something lady. And she lived on Pearl Harbor the day it was attacked. And she was, I'm assuming, kind of older teenage girl. Her parents, her father was a naval doctor. They lived on a hill that overlooked the naval base. And it was a Sunday, and she happened to be coming home from church, and she was at the door, ready to go into her house, and she heard noise behind her, and looked back and saw planes going, screaming along and all. And she said to herself, gosh, they don't do war games on Sunday. And just kind of shrugged her shoulders and went inside the house. Well, minutes later, of course, the phone was ringing because her father is a doctor for the Navy, and he was told, get down to the hospital now because all the wounded were starting to come in. And that's, of course, what got us into World War II. And it affected, the whole nation. And I'm sure those people, as a generation, were shocked kind of into war, just as if this generation is shocked into war because of 9/11. And then interestingly, because World War II started, she met a young pilot named Stan, who now is a 90-something guy. He just went to his 90th birthday. But Stan was, a young man. He happened to be a pilot of a small plane. He joins the Navy. They make him a pilot, and he goes out and he's fighting the Japanese in the Pacific Theater, as they call it. And he was shot down. And he apparently landed in the water, and a Chinese trawler picked him up and rescued him. Chinese who were enemies of the Japanese at that point, friends of the United States, brought him back. Somehow he got back with his unit. And he got back in that airplane and went up and started shooting again and fighting again. And he got shot down again. And again by the Japanese. And the Japanese Zeros got him. And he's rescued again, this time by Aborigines. The Aborigines didn't like the Japanese. And so they harbored him, and then somehow he got back to his unit and flew again, and he made it through the war, etc. So why do I bring this story up? Because I got to know Margot and Stan through their kids. When I was in my teens and 20s and 30s, I knew their kids, and I played in bands with them, played a lot of guitar with them, were at their house for many fun nights, went on my first date with my wife to their house. She reminds me, just really good longtime friends. But one day, I never had a problem with these people. Always had a great time with these people. And one day, I pulled up into their driveway, and I had bought a Mitsubishi car. Some of you are kind of picking up on it. I pull up in the driveway, and Stan apparently saw Mitsubishi on that, and disappeared. And I'm kind of like, where's Stan? I get in the house, and Stan's wife, Margot, says to me, Mitsubishi are the ones that made Japanese Zeros, the planes that shot Stan down. Like, he cannot put up with Mitsubishi. Those guys tried to kill him. So, I'm embarrassed, and I love this guy. I love Stan. He's like my second father. I was embarrassed. He's embarrassed. But, there's that whole silent generation of people who really can't forgive the Japanese. And, Stan, and we've talked about it, and it's something he just can't get over. Like, he survived the war, but he saw his buddies die as a result of the war and Mitsubishi and all the whole thing. So, back to my question, can we ever forgive our enemies? Well, can the silent generation ever forgive theirs? And, I don't know. I still don't know if Stan can really totally forgive them. He's a nice man. He's lived a long life. But something deep inside of him, it's going to be tough. So there's another juxtaposition. You have World War II and forgiveness. Like, is it ever really going to happen? Is there ever going to be true forgiveness? But then to kind of look at it a different way, we can go back many millennia and go back to the time of what we saw in the first reading today. And it's that reading about Joseph and his brothers. And if you don't remember, we read it here like a month ago. Joseph was the young son. He was the favorite son of his father. And he went out to be a shepherd with his brothers. And his brothers, envied him because he was the favorite son. And so they plotted, they conspired, and they said, let's throw Joseph in a ditch, right? And just leave him there, let him rot and die, right? But then one of the brothers said, no, let's not do that. Let's sell him. He saw some traders come along in their camels. Said, well, let's get some money for him. So they sold him. They sold their own brother, right? And he goes off, and then we don't hear anything. And time goes by, and Joseph, if you know the stories, he eventually works his way into the king's household, king of Egypt. He becomes like second in command. And now Egypt is doing well, and he's like number two, and he's got a lot of power over a lot of things, and Egypt's collecting their grain and helping their people. And along comes his brothers because they're starving to death, basically. And neither one of them knows. Nobody knows that Joseph is alive. They assume he's dead. And then Joseph's brothers find out that he's not only alive, but he's number two man. And he has power over them. He can give them grain and keep them alive or not. And they come to Joseph with this story that Dad's dying wish was that you would forgive us. And, Joseph could have just swept them away like a fly, But the reading says he wept. And then the brothers wept, and they fell down and said, we're your slaves. In other words, we are so sorry, and we are so... they had no choices. They were out of luck. I mean, if he didn't take care of them, they'd be basically dead men, and their whole families and everything. But Joseph said, am I the Lord? It's not really up to me. And he reassured them that he would take care of them. And what was interesting is Joseph saw that God's hand was in all of this. That despite him being sold by his brothers, first thrown in a ditch to die, sold by his brothers, and then taken to Egypt and thrown in jail himself, and then slowly working his way kind of up the power structure of Egypt, and now being in a power position. It was God that kind of got him there, which is an amazing thing because Joseph could have been very bitter. But he sees the hand of God in his life, taking even to prison, but then working his way up, and eventually Joseph forgives his own brothers who tried to kill him. I mean, it's a crime. Could have thrown him in jail and let him rot. So, again, you have this man of faith, Joseph, and forgiveness. And that juxtaposition kind of matches. Those two things kind of match. And then we work our way to the gospel. So 2,000 years ago, Jesus tells this story to Peter. And Peter says, how many times should I forgive? 7 times? What does Jesus say? 77 times. Well, by the time you count 77 on your hands and your toes, you've forgotten, right? You have to be a forgiving person to count 77 times. And then Jesus tells that story of the master who, has this servant who owes him 10,000 talents. And I don't know the numbers, but it was a lot of money. It's like $1 million. Let's just say $1 million. And, he's going to throw the servant into jail and his whole wife and family and basically sell them as slaves to get some of his money back. But the slave falls down and begs, please, forgive me my debt. And the master, his heart melts and he pities the guy and he forgives his debt. But then the next part of the story is the slave goes out to get his money from the guy that owes him and doesn't have any mercy and throws that person into jail, etc. So when the people that know the master go back to him and say, hey, this is what went down, the master says, now I am going to throw you in jail because I forgave you everything and somebody else owed you some little debt and you had no mercy on it. It's a great story about, how much forgiveness we have in our lives, all the things that we've been given. And we have to take care of those that kind of, owe us a debt. The Lord tells us to forgive everyone in your heart. That's a lifetime challenge, right? I haven't even gotten into all our circle of friends and acquaintances. We're just talking about 9/11. We're keeping it out there as a nation. So let's fast forward back to today, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Are we as a nation ready to forgive those who terrorized us? Are we as a people a forgiving people? And then I got a new number for you, 9/11 and 77 times.